A really important distinction about emotions are that they are always a combination of thinking and sensation together. In fact, without that combination, you don't have emotions in the same way.
Are you listening?
This is the Rob Scott Show.
Damn.
I mean, really, like, if we're not trying to change the world, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Rob Scott Show. I am here with Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Rob. How are you today?
I'm doing great. What should we talk about today?
Yeah, so I'm excited to record this one. I thought it might be a good idea to kind of dig a little bit more into emotions. Like, I know we're always trying to help people become more self-aware and give them useful tips, and we talk a lot about thought. And so I thought it might be interesting to kind of start with emotions. And I know along with other clients and people that we work with and people in our programs, are often we'll say, like, held captive by their emotions. So either they're surprised by them or they can't get, people get stuck on emotions. And so I just think, like, kind of peeling back a layer of it and looking at really what emotions are and how they work and how we can manage them would be a really valuable conversation.
Yeah, so we have a really valuable teaching in Hacking Happy, and I'd love to sort of honor that and call it out. And I think it's a really cool shortcut for people to understand how to manage emotions. And before I unfold that for everybody or kind of lay that out, what I want people to get is that our emotions are really the driver of everything for us, right? They're the thing underneath kind of what we want. Everything that we're doing because we want to feel a certain way, right? We think we want the car, but we want the car because the car is going to make us feel proud or excited, or we're going to love to drive it, and all that stuff is around how we feel. And yet there's not much training out there on how to manufacture certain emotions or get out of the negative emotions or do any of these things. And so I think this one distinction can be really helpful, especially for people who are stuck in a ton of anxiety or stuck in a ton of depression or tend to have a lot of fear in their life or anger, right? So I think what I want to share is the fact that we tend to think that and I talk about this a lot in all our work, there's thoughts, there's feelings, and then there's behavior, right? These are the dimensions of life that we'd like more mastery over. We want to be able to manage our thinking, we want to be able to manage our feeling, we want to be able to manage our doing. What's interesting about feelings, though, is we tend to think that they're their own thing, right? That emotions are just a way of feeling and that's all that's going on. A really important distinction about emotions are that they are always a combination of thinking and sensation together. In fact, without that combination, you don't have emotions in the same way. Okay. So if I just stop there, does that make sense to you as I explain it?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good kind of breakdown, and also because it is simple to get, but it is, I mean, it's really kind of revealing to learning how to manage stuff that kind of, because I think of emotions I feel like we could just spend days just talking about emotions, right? There's all these different kinds of emotions. I love what you were saying about how, we think we want the car, but we want the feeling that the car gives us. If an old sock gave us the same feeling as driving,
right,
a Mercedes, then everyone would want a sock, and we get tricked, I think, a lot we talk about how we get lost in our head and lost in our thoughts, and it tricks us. And so I think kind of really being able to have a grasp on what your mind is doing, but also understanding how that piece plays into the feeling aspect is kind of next level to me.
Yeah. So yeah, without what do we do with that information? And I want to say it again. So there's a cognitive part of emotions, and then there's a somatic part of emotions, meaning the somatic is the sort of bodily experience of what's happening. And that combination in your system of you, right, that's going on is what gives you the experience of, say, anxiety or whatever, right? So why this is useful is that if you notice that, you can actually learn to move your attention away from the thought only and not worry about the physical experience that's going on, but actually just pay more attention to the physical experience that's going on. Like, move your attention into what's happening in my body right now. So let's say you're overwhelmed with anxiety. You wake up in a panic, some dream triggered something, or you've been thinking about something and you're super overwhelmed with this. The continued story, along with the physical sensation that comes with it, is that negative experience of anxiety, right? So a shortcut there is to move your attention from whatever you're thinking about, maybe directly into the sensation of the anxiety itself. So when you do that, you've moved the thinking part, the cognition part, away from the story that's fueling that emotion and into the somatic part. And so it sort of cuts off the cognition or changes it, right, enough that now you just have this energy in your chest, right? Let's say it's in your chest, okay? And so you have this energy in your chest that no longer, like immediately, doesn't have the same quality as when you were in that worried or anxious state, right? So all of a sudden that just becomes a tingling sensation or a warmth or whatever. And we actually show in Hacking Happy how you can actually switch that over to excitement instead, as an example, right? Like,
right. Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah, excitement and anxiety actually feel very similar in the body. So if you just tell yourself a different story, right? So one move would be telling no new story, just cutting off the cognition altogether and being in the somatic or the sensation of it, right? That's one move. And
would that be more like meditation? I mean, that's meditation in a sense. You're removing the thought aspect and just being with the feelings of it.
Yeah, so it absolutely is. I don't want to confuse people with like just calling that meditation, because meditation is a practice of kind of where your mind is in any moment. So yes, that would be a form of moving your attention around, and that would be in the moment of meditative practice for sure. But I don't want people to go like, oh, that's meditation, right? Because it's
right. Okay,
a little more broad than that, But the move here is, are you able to realize, okay, I'm thinking about something, and the thoughts become addictive, right? When we're in that thing, it feels like we need to figure it out in thought. It feels like we need to, get to some solution or figure it out there. And that only fuels more cognition and somatic experience, right? That combination, which makes that emotion build and get potentially worse and worse and worse. Now, if you can figure it out, that might be a path out of it. Also, that's not completely ineffectual, but the shortcut to getting out of these things that are so difficult is to drop the thought and literally come into either the feeling or change the thought. Because if you have a new thought feeling combination, all of a sudden the emotion actually changes, right? The experience of it changes. So if all of a sudden I go to, hey, I'm actually not nervous about it. And even if I were to kind of lie to myself in the moment and say, you know what, I'm excited about it instead, and I start thinking about, like, could I be excited about this? Is that maybe what this is? You'll notice it becomes a feeling of excitement instead. All right. So take depression, right? I'm depressed. I'm thinking about something, so-and-so, this happened. I could actually make us depressed if I got into too much description. So I'll avoid that. But, we're all going to die. Whatever the thing is that's just so horrible. If you notice, that comes with some body sensation. It might be lethargy. It might be all these different things. Without worrying about that so much, we actually can just drop the thinking part of it, come into the sensation as one move, and notice, like, it's actually okay to feel the sensations of this without the story. That will make things subside and shift and change. Or you can actually shift the thought over to something else, and that new combination of thought and sensation will have a different emotional experience as well. And to me, that's such a massive shortcut. It's just such a valuable thing to start playing with and start learning how to do that. I wanted to share it here. I mean,
I love it. And to me, if anxiety is to excitement, I think like exhaustion is to depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
I'm so depressed. I'm like, I don't think I'm depressed. I think I'm just exhausted, which is,
totally.
So,
yeah. I mean, clinical depression may be another thing, right? There are chemical imbalances that start going on in your mind. You might, that's what some pharmaceuticals are for, that can help people kind of pop out of that. I don't suggest habituating that, but they could be useful at times, because changing your brain chemistry is certainly another way to change your state. In all the different ways that we can do that. But this move, without any medication, without a drink, without a drug, without anything, you can start changing your experience of your emotions immediately, just by realizing, okay, wow, this emotion, first off, isn't a thing on its own, right? It's not just this feeling that I'm having. You have to realize that you're doing something in your cognition, and that's causing a certain sensation. And those two things together are what we end up calling these different emotions. And so a really quick shortcut out of that is to There's another path to this too. And Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, like changing your body, changing your physicality, right? So if I'm feeling depressed, you're going to notice that your body starts taking on a certain quality of like slumped shoulders. I may want to lay down. I may want to do these things. Well, if you can force yourself to change the somatic experience by going for a run or taking a walk or just standing up straight or forcing even a fake smile, right? All of a sudden that physicality changes the somatic part of the emotion. And that can deconstruct that combination of thought and experience also. So think then if you were to change both, if you were to either stop thinking about whatever you're thinking about by moving it into sensation or changing a new thought, right? That would be playing with the thought end of it. Or you can change the physicality of it by, can I get in a hot bath? Can I take a cold shower? Can I go get a massage? Can I go for a run? Can I do something to change the physical experience of my body also? Even if you're still maybe ruminating about something, that can break that chain and be enough to shift out of a certain emotion.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the aspect of like, can we control how we feel, or are we, victims to our feelings? And no, I've always felt this way, or oh no, every time I'm around this person, I feel this way, or whatever, because I think we often feel like we're victims to our emotions, whether we realize we can change it or not. And then there's like, here's two very tangible ways to kind of tweak it, like you said, either within the thought of the sensation. And then the other kind of thing that was coming up for me is, I think there might be, or I guess I should say, what are your thoughts on kind of the linguistics of the word emotion and the word feelings? Because I often think they're interchanged. And so when we think about it, how your emotions are created of thought and a feeling, then there's really is an important kind of difference between an emotion and a feeling. A feeling is just like the sensation. And I think often it's like, how are you feeling? Like, how are you feeling today? What are your feelings? We teach kids to express their feelings, which is not the same as emotion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, would you agree?
Well, so I think it depends on obviously whoever's saying it and how they made it in the moment. If somebody says, what are you feeling? And it's in a context of like, what are you holding, or what does that feel like?
Sure.
And I'm holding something tactile. That's a different thing than like, what are you feeling internally? Right. So I think feelings has maybe like a wider definition just from tactile touch and all that. But we do often equate that in our linguistics with what my emotions are in the moment. So maybe a better way to talk about it is not just feeling, but what we're talking about is sensation, right? So the actual sensation that comes along with an emotional response to something is calling our attention back to sensation, right? And I'm sure we've talked about this in podcasts. It's pretty deep in a lot of our programs, but our mind can only really be in two realms. It's either thinking about something or it's experiencing sensation and reality in this moment, right? We keep coming back to this. And so this is another path to get out of thinking, right? To break up with the truth of thinking, because we're doing all this meaning making all the time. And much of our meaning making doesn't serve us. It ends up being overly negative or difficult or painful. And so what we want to do is, and this is what a meditation practice is about, it's really breaking up with the attachment to thoughts or even just the truth of thoughts, right? So thoughts aren't true. Thoughts are thoughts, right? So thoughts could be very inaccurate all over the place, but often they appear or they seem true to us. And so if I'm in a thought that's causing a lot of anxiety or depression or anger, and I'm really attached to it and it feels really true, it's going to be really attractive. And I may not even notice the physical sensations. I'm aware that I'm not happy. I'm aware that things are bad right now, but I might be so captured by the thought, right? And I'm just like, this is horrible. And I'm in my story and I want to tell everybody about it. I want to do all these things. This is a path to dropping the thought portion of this and coming back into the sensation or the somatic experience of it. And that breaks that connection of what's required for an emotion to exist, which is both parts, thought and feeling, or thought and sensation. And through that, it's this path back into presence. Your body can now recover. It's not being fueled by this story or thought or attachment or rumination, right? And so if people realize that, it's a large call. For somebody that's never done this, it's very difficult to tell them your thoughts may be lying to you or they just may not be useful in the moment, right? It's just a thought that's just not helping you in this moment. So can you break up with it just for now, come back to the physical sensation of what's going on, and watch how you shift because of that. And it just affords you so much more agency. It allows you to choose, right? If you want to continue to be mad or sad or scared or whatever, do it all day long. That's completely up to you, but you don't have to. There's a path out of that should you want it. And, changing either side of that can break that bond. The fastest way, without even having to get up or move, is to just drop the thought and go into the sensation, right? Which, to your point before, people who do meditate or have any practice of that, that'll be much easier for them because they'll understand what it is to drop a thought, because the practice of meditation is that play of thought versus sensation, right?
Yeah, and I just really hope that this episode specifically speaks to those. I just keep thinking of, people who feel like they're victims to their emotions, which is, myself included at times, a lot of us, where we're just like, oh, there's nothing to do. There's no way out. I am just this because this is how I feel. And so that's why I kind of, I love it. It's simple, but it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And also, just thinking about you'll know when people can do this well, and you'll know when they can't. And I think of what you talk about, and sorry if I get this wrong, but it's like the beauty of trauma or the beauty of sadness or something. And it's talking about, taking an emotion that we often don't associate as, good or whatever. That's a bad thing to be angry or sad or, whatever. And then finding beauty in the sensation and really being able to see there's two parts that's going on here, and it's creating this experience for me. And it's affecting, how I'm behaving or whatever. But to being able to source joy in a state where mostly people don't want to be, you know what I mean?
Totally. I think that's great. And you got that, pretty much right on. The thing that I love telling people is that if you can put down the judgment of something being not how you want it, almost anything can be a really beautiful experience, right? So being really angry, if you're not trying to be any other way, and I'm not talking about anger like acting in the world or breaking things or hurting people or whatever. I mean, just the sensation of being angry is a pretty astonishing sensation, right? And so if you're not comparing, if you're not trying to get out of it, it's a pretty crazy ride on a roller coaster. That's, our whole life is this roller coaster of all these different experiences. If we could take on the mindset that I'm okay to be any way that I am, right? It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be all these things. And the suffering comes from when it's not okay to be whatever I am in the moment, right? So you can be deeply sad. And if you actually are just in it, you drop the thinking about it, you actually feel it, it does become this really beautiful sensation, right? And I promise, even anxiety, you put it down, the meaning, the story, all the worry, that you actually take the fuel away from it, just experience that energy that's happening in you. If you watch that as a conscious observer of it, it's actually a really profound, it can be a really beautiful experience. And that might sound like people are like, all right, I'm turning this off because this is absurd, but it really can be beautiful, right? And so that's what I think enlightenment looks like. That's what I think is possible for us. And that's
we went from emotions to enlightenment. That's a very short path, but it's true.
I mean, it is. If you can master your emotions, really, that's what an enlightened person walking around is capable of. That's what they're doing, is they're in that experience. And it doesn't mean that they don't occasionally get attached to things, but they're way more aware of that. They can be let down, but that experience can be really beautiful, right? It can be this, it doesn't become this one note experience of life. It becomes noticing the beauty in all of it, in the entire ride, right? And so getting out of the mental delusion that's driving these things that feel really out of balance, it doesn't mean if you've been hurt, there's not something to do about it. You might need to hold a boundary, or there is action to take after that. But in the actual experience of it, we have so much more freedom in the quality of that experience. If we can become self-aware enough to notice, wow, I'm thinking, I'm ruminating, I'm caught here. How can I get away, change that thought or drop that thought? And you will watch the emotion dissipate, right? It just becomes a different thing right away.
Yeah. And I kind of think of another thing that you've talked about before. And so maybe our listeners have heard this, but knowing everything that is just said, right? These two parts of emotion and our ability to kind of take control of them. When you think about, I wonder if this is just, the fact that we have to learn how to do this as adults, is this, going back and fixing what happened as children, right? Because if you think of a 2 or 3-year-old, it is like full on emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are
Yeah.
feeling the feelings, they're expressing themselves, and often for whether that's anger, frustration, excitement, joy, like they're running, through the library screaming, or they're on the park and they're singing too loud, or whatever. Like there's a part of, I think, our society and our world, and this idea of like kind of like, oh, let's not be too expressive. Let's kind of dial it down. There's a time and a place to be expressive. And so without, for a small child, without the ability to understand, okay, well, there's two things going on. I'm having these thoughts about this cookie or this book or this park, and I'm having all these like feelings within my body, without the maturity and the mental capacity to be able to understand that, then they just become this one thing that you're like, oh, I take this out at a certain time. It's safe to take it out at a certain time. It's not safe to do it here. Don't be loud when mom's on the phone. Don't run through the grocery store, that kind of thing. And there's just different, I don't know. I think it just gets oversimplified maybe as we're growing up.
We get conditioned for sure. So one, I want to say, I'm not suggesting everybody just tantrums whenever they want, right? It's not,
yeah, don't do that.
We're not.
Well, that's happening already, isn't it?
Yeah. But we're definitely not aspiring to be childish, right? Like that's not what it is. I think your point is great though, that the emotions may be more pure in a child, right? They're really in the experience. They don't even know it's bad, but very quickly, most of us, maybe all of us to some degree through society, but most of us through our parents start to get shut down, right? So one of the shortcut parenting moves that I always talk about is whatever your child's doing in the moment, make it okay to be that, and then put the behavioral correction maybe on top of that. So it's like, hey, I see you're angry, totally okay that you're angry. I would be angry too. However, what do we do with that anger? And then there's a teaching there. Why I say that is what happens to most of us is that anger, that natural response to something gets shamed, right? It gets shut down. Don't be like that. Cut it out. Why are you so upset? Right? All these things. And in that moment, we feel wrong, right? We feel like there's something wrong with me because I've got this very natural experience. And, essentially the leader of the universe, my parent, is telling me that that's not the way to be. I'm supposed to be different than I am. And so that's where we start to learn how to put on masks and fake it and pretend we're stronger than we are and all these different things, right? So most of us are carrying this aversion to feeling, right? We're not very good at actually feeling feelings, being in them, knowing what to do healthily with them. And so we're feeling anger, but we're not really in touch with it. We're stuffing it down until it's too late. And now it's so huge. And we're not speaking into things in relationships that hurt us or upset us because we don't want to upset them. And, it's the same thing that we learned as a child. I don't want to upset mom with my anger. So I'm not going to tell her I'm upset or mad, right? Because I get yelled at when I'm mad or whatever. And so what we need to do here as adults, to your point, is relearn what is it to feel these things, but somatically. And what is it to notice when I'm adding extra to it in my thinking so that, I can put that down when it fits me to actually morph the emotion and feel it in a different way and actually let it process and heal. And that's another dimension of this is when you give your body the ability to actually feel the feeling, let the story kind of fall away or change the story, as I keep talking about. What happens is your body can actually process that, calm down. The body doesn't keep kicking out the stress hormones, right, to change our physiology and all that stuff. We can actually go, take a breath into it. If we need to cry for a little bit. If we need to be scared for a little bit, whatever, and watch it morph and change. And that's a good way to actually experience emotions and let them get all the way through, rather than amping them up until our partner's like, hey, you can't be so mad all the time. And then we're trying to stuff it down, and then we're drinking to feel better, and then whatever all the stuff is, right?
Right.
So
yeah, no, that's why, I feel very passionately about this subject because I definitely know that I had to do a lot of work to be able to kind of follow the through line of my emotions, right? Because I'm like the queen of being like, here, let me just open this and shove it way down and then never come back to it. And I think a little bit it's like how you were raised and how your parents were raised and what is appropriate. But like, I know I'm not alone in that. So often, like even let's not even go extreme, right? The stress of something, the decision of something, we don't want to feel overwhelmed. So we're like, we're going to put that off. So I know so many of us do this. So the ability to follow the through line and feel your emotions completely, like you were saying, is really kind of a game changer. And then the other thing is that the awareness that, or the knowledge that your emotions are so connected to your thoughts, the more that you master, the brain, because we talk a lot about mindset, and you're talking about story and where we put our attention and being aware of our thoughts, which, you hear it and you're just like, okay, why does that matter? And I think in an episode or two back, we were like, no, like, this is it. Like, that is the thing that everybody actually wants, going all the way back to the idea of like, it's the feeling that you get when you get the car, right? So the better that you get at the thought, because now that you can see that it's connected to the emotion, you're also going to be able to be better in that realm of kind of just controlling both. And that makes you, that is everything. That is us being able to manage ourselves. That is us being able to set clear goals. Like everything we've talked about on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, managing your own consciousness, right? Which is, your consciousness is going to include all those sensations that you're feeling. And, with a consciousness that you're more, I use the term agentic, right? Where you're an agent rather than a victim, rather than the world pushing you around because you don't know what to do. Rather than marketing messages and political messages and messages from your parents making you feel certain ways. Some of us have partners, husbands and wives and things like that are belittling us and making us feel different ways. Some of us have kids that are difficult and they are making us feel insecure and all these things. How can you gain agency of your own attention and notice that connection with attention, and then how you feel somatically, right? The sensations that happen with that connection is what makes these things that end up getting bucketed into emotions, right? And if we, the more that we are these emotions, the more we take them on as a sense of identity. So if you have an emotion in a moment, it's an emotion. But if you have it for a day, it becomes maybe a funk, right? If you have it for a week or a month and you're just depressed all this time, maybe you start becoming like, wow, I'm kind of depressed this season. You take that on, and before you know it, you're a sad person, right? You just take on like, I'm just depressed all the time. And this is now a pattern that you've built up of a way of thinking and a way of feeling that is giving you the identity of, I'm a sad person, or I'm an anxious person, or I'm an angry person. And they can become aspects of our very sense of self as they get patterned in more deeply. And so to get free of that, to change yourself, if you're interested in that, if you want to be different, if you want to be better than you are, we've got to master attention to some degree, start noticing where our attention is, learn the skills to move it around and place it places more mindfully. And this connection into sensation and realizing that that's what an emotion is, it's a game changer when you really get that.
Definitely. Let's tell our listeners how they can do that with us if they want to.
Sure. Yeah. So one way is you can go join the Fundamental Shift coaching group. With that, you get access to all our programs. So Hacking Happy, Recode Your Mind, Back to Breath, Future Now, a bunch of different stuff in there. Monthly live calls with me. It's a phenomenal deal right now if you want to go check it out. If you do sign up for that, it's at fundamentalshift.com. If you do sign up for that, I suggest starting with Hacking Happy right away. It's just a phenomenal training in attention and emotional mastery. And we start getting into a little bit of mindset stuff. And that alone is really valuable. And then you can join us on the next live call and get some real coaching from me. And we'll get into your goals and what you're into in your life.
Yeah. And let me just kind of interject because you went over it, I think, too quick. But,
okay, cool. Yeah.
So if you join this group, what you get is an all access pass to all of our digital offerings. And as we kind of talked about in the beginning, what Rob just said, there's a program that you get, which is, a standalone program. It's part of the membership. You get full access to it. It's called Hacking Happy. And it is like, I also want to just tip my hat to it because it's a really great program. And if you're someone who's like, this is really resonating with you and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to learn how to do this better, that's great. There's also a program in there called Recode Your Mind. And that deals with the thinking aspect. So if you're like, oh, this is a concept that I love, and you're playing with it a little bit and you're like, I want to work on both sides, both those programs are super powerful. And, with the coaching group, you get them both. So, but yeah, more. It's a really, and much more. But for this specific side, since we talked about, emotions and thought and sensation, there's also a Back to Breath challenge, which is a 7-day mindfulness challenge that you get, which is awesome if you're someone that's like, meditation sounds like it could help me.
Yeah, let me check that out, right?
A little bit. Yeah. So yeah, it's really kind of the place to go to get everything.
Yeah. It's awesome. We're proud of it. It's really fun. There's a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of cool people in the group. So we would love to have you join us if you'd like to. So anything else to add?
No, I think that's great.
Short and sweet today. It's good. Hey, your emotions are two things. It's your thoughts and your feelings together. Your thoughts and your sensations together. If you change either one, you're going to change the emotion. It's a really nice shortcut. I hope that helps you. Appreciate you very, very much. Be kind to yourself and everybody else. We'll talk to you really soon. Bye-bye.